So DNS is basically a short form for something called domain name system. Now what is this domain name system? This is used to translate domain names to IP addresses, which what I was saying earlier, right? That IP addresses are the real addresses using which we can reach computers. But for our simplicity, we converted those to human readable domain names. But while navigating, we need a system to know that, okay, this google.com or this facebook.com, what is the actual computer where this thing is there? The DNS lets us resolve that, convert that, translate that domain name into IP addresses, as simple as that. Now, flipkart.com, let's say, this is a human readable address, right? Now I have to find the actual IP addresses which is mapped corresponding to this domain name. So DNS will help us do that. Similarly, Amazon.in, let's say. So what is the IP address at which Amazon.in is hosted? DNS lets us know that what is the IP address. Now we have to understand that how to configure. So basically, when you buy a particular domain name, the registrar from where you have purchased this domain name gives you a flexibility to do either two things. You can either configure these IP addresses directly there, or you can use some third party domain name system provider. There is something called Route 53 on AWS. You can use something like that, but I'll not go in those details. The fact is that there are ways in which you can configure these IP addresses if you are the owner of this domain name, right? Okay, but once I have configured it, how actually it looks from third party person, like you're not an administrator, I'm just a user of flipkart.com, right? How can I see, is there a mechanism where I can see that, okay, flipkart.com is actually resolving to something like some IP address, right? I don't know what, right? What is currently mapped to flipkart.com. So actually there is a way to figure out, and it is very easy using your own browser, something Chrome or Firefox. So there is something called developer tools. We will go in detail what is developer tools and how to use that. But here I will just give you a glimpse of that. So let's say flipkart.com we have opened. It is opened, page has come, but actually using that, this Flipkart using DNS, our browser has resolved this www.flipkart.com to a particular IP address, went to that computer, this address, got the page document, HTML document, and then browser gave it to browser, and then browser rendered it. This is how actually it worked. But can we see that IP address somewhere? Yes, you can. So basically you need to go into inspect, and then developer tools will open, right? In network, you can see all the requests which are going on. So after opening actually network, you need to refresh it, then all the requests will see. So you see all these images, JavaScript, CSS, pages, HTML document, everything is loaded here. One of the things is the first thing is loaded is like the base document. All these things are loaded after that. So basically these things are embedded inside the base HTML document, which you will see later, right? First, now for simplicity, firstly this document is first loaded, and here we will see that, see, this IP address is there. So basically our browser resolved this domain name www.flipkart.com to this IP address, right? And why 443 port? By now you might be comfortable, right? So HTTPS is hosted at generally at by default at 443 port, and that is why. But this part is the IP address which browser got. But from where the browser got it? The browser got it from DNS system, right? The DNS is a publicly hosted system where anybody can query and get these translations. We'll just in a bit see how to get those translations, but you can see that how the browser gets it. Now we will go into other, so this is status codes and what is this get, we'll all get into those things, but for now we can clearly see that there is a way to identify that actually from which IP address the content is coming, right? Okay. Now we can see that it is used to used so that the HTTP requests are sent to the correct server in the internet, and that is obvious, right? Because the addressing mechanism is basically the IP address. This is just a human readable name, right? So basically, essentially, this domain name system is acting like an address book. So this person, what is its address? This person, what is its address? Similarly, this domain name, what is the IP address? So this whole DNS thing is like an address book. You can open it, look it up, and you're done. You got the address. Okay. So next we'll see that sometimes the websites can also be reached directly via their IP address. Now this is like this will not always work, but for some websites, actually they are configured. You have to configure the backend in such a way that for some websites, if you configure, they can be accessed by this domain name. They can also be directly accessed by this IP address. Again, you can again configure that using this IP address when you open the website. Do you want in the URL this IP address to remain, or you want it to again redirect it to flipkart.com or whatever the domain name is there? Both can be done, right? So in Flipkart example, we'll see that 163.53.76.86. If we copy this and paste it in browser, and again if you enter, then again browser will apply HTTP, but I will actually show you full that this HTTP protocol obviously you are applying, and then if you are accessing this, then see again it is opening flipkart.com. So see that IP address, not only it has resolved to the correct computer, it reached the correct server, and it knows that it is Flipkart, and it redirected it to the correct website URL which Flipkart wants us to see, right? But I just gave you an example that it is possible that some web servers are configured in such a way that they can be accessed via domain name also, and some can be accessed via IP addresses also. Okay, next is the part which I was discussing earlier, that is there a way that if browsers can look it up, is there a way that I can also look it up, that okay, flipkart.com, right, without opening browser developer tools, is there a way so that I can know that this www.flipkart.com, its IP address is what? Yeah, so it can be done, and that process of knowing the mapping, the fetching the IP address from the domain name, right, using DNS, that process is known as DNS lookup. And if you simply Google the term DNS lookup, right, then you will see that you will get some results, and one of the results, like the first one only, let's try that. You'll see that okay, DNS lookup, which means that okay, essentially what we are trying to do is that we are trying to get the DNS records of this domain name, and if you enter, then you will see that this then you will see that it is trying to get a record. A record means address record, right? When we might study it in detail later, but for now it is like enough to know that flipkart.com, and you see that even www Flipkart, which means that www and flipkart.com both are pointing to the same thing. So it is just a configuration, right? So this actually means that www is configured as an alias of flipkart.com, and whose IP address is this. So essentially if you directly look up rather than www, if you directly look up this, then this will also work. See, same thing, right? So essentially these IP addresses are mapped in the DNS, and using these ways we can look up DNS. And actually this is actually what this thing is also doing. See, 163.53.76.86, right? See, same thing. So basically how browser is looking up DNS, here you are manually looking up DNS to get the IP address, right? So this is the way. Okay, so now we understood most of the things. Next we are going to see that how all these things fit into the TCP IP layer, which means that okay, everything I have got, the mapping I have done, IP addresses I have got it, but how do I use this IP address to actually go there? I know that the data is coming from here, but actually how it is coming here? What is the protocol which takes care of that? And that protocol is called TCP IP. So it is a combination of two protocols, which is TCP which is a protocol, and then IP which is a protocol, right? So IP is not in IP address. So IP address is obviously that is Internet Protocol address. When you simply say IP, you say IP address. That means Internet Protocol address. But here in that sense, TCP/IP it is the protocol which we will discuss next.